Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for. Quickly here in Dallas, we've got several: construction litigation, general business and commercial litigation, corporate M&A, and then trial boutique. In Austin, tax litigation, family law, and then special education. In Tarrant County / Fort Worth, we've got a family law opportunity and a corporate and real estate opportunity. In Houston, insurance defense and corporate finance. And then in San Antonio, we've got a probate and business litigation position. So lots there. There's more than that. So if any of those are of interest to you or someone you know, let me know. Or if you're just in general wanting to have a conversation about other opportunities that might be out there, would love to talk with you. You can email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. All right, today we are in Dallas, where our guest is Colbie Campbell. Colbie is a partner with the construction boutique Slates Harwell. Her practice includes representing general contractors, owners, and volume home builders in all phases of construction matters, particularly within litigation. Colbie also practices trademark and copyright law. And prior to coming to Slates Harwell, she worked for an AmLaw 200 firm. Colbie is active in a number of construction law groups in Texas, including serving as a task force member for TEXO, Executive Women's Leadership Group. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Colbie Campbell on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Colbie Campbell joins us right now. Colbie, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
Absolutely. I'm excited to visit with you. And as we get started here, why don't you share with us a little bit about your practice and your firm and tell us what you and your firm do?
Absolutely. So I am a partner at Slates Harwell, which is a 12 to 13 attorney boutique construction law firm. Our founding folks came over from Gardere, which is now known as Foley. So we were bigger firm lawyers that came over and started Slates Harwell in 2013. So I have been with the same people, but not at the same firm for the majority of my practice. We practice construction law specifically. Our primary client base are general contractors and owner-developer clients, and we represent them from everything from contract negotiation through litigation.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask that. So I know sometimes there's a focus firm to firm between kind of the transactional side or the litigation side, but it sounds like you really go kind of cover to cover with the construction clients that you have.
That is the case here. We one of the things that I personally love about practicing construction law and the way that we have our practice set up here at Slates Harwell is the fact that we consider ourselves both transactional lawyers and litigators. Mm-hmm. I know for me, when I was starting out in my career, I didn't know if I wanted to go the transactional or litigation route. So construction law actually blended both of those together in a really great way for me. Personally, my practice in the construction area is much heavier litigation focused than it is transactional. And that also seems to kind of ebb and flow with just what's being built versus what's being litigated at any given time. And then I also practice kind of a unique spinoff, which is I represent real estate developers and mainly construction industry folks with trademark and intellectual property needs. Okay. So kind of separate and apart from construction law, but it's still construction clients. So my transactional practice is really more geared towards the trademark clearance and registration areas than it is probably contract negotiation most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's neat. And what is going on right now in the construction law world that keeps you up at night? Are your clients up at night? What are some of the either evolving or novel issues or things that are going on?
So there is quite a bit going on right now. I would say number one on most of our clients' minds, especially general contractors as well as owners, are kind of two things that go hand in hand. One being price escalation of materials.
Yes.
That's happening across the board, but it's really impacting the construction industry. The best example to give right now is lumber.
Yes.
If you've gone out and tried to buy a 2x4 recently, it is just lumber is really going up. And that can cause a lot of problems as it relates to how you've bid a project versus what's it's going to cost to build that project.
Right.
So we're getting a lot of those questions right now.
Sure.
Also, just supply chain disruptions in general can really impact the construction of a project. Things need to get there on time so the building can be built in a particular sequence, and that's been difficult lately. So both of those, I think, are probably, COVID spinoffs. But those
Sure.
those are really what are happening right now that I think most people are staying up at night over.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who perhaps foolishly is going in the initial stages of building a home, I'm paying close attention to these things, especially on the lumber side and the labor and supply side too, all of it. So when something, I mean, and I would say like, at least in my very limited area of knowledge of this is when something like a significant increase in price on something like lumber, which I forget now how many hundreds of percent we're up now versus where we were maybe a year and a half or two ago. What's sort of practically what happens between most general contractors and subcontractors and developers and clients in terms of like, is there sort of like okay, we're going to have to kind of retool this contract and figure stuff out? Or are people like holding the line? No, we signed this at $1 and now it's $5. We don't care. Like what, or does it kind of just depend on the situation? What's in practice, what typically tends to happen?
Well, the number one answer to that question and to most questions we get are what's in your contract.
Sure.
Because we certainly saw this last year and the year before with tariffs. So a lot of times you have a contractual clause that will specifically address, price escalation and how that's handled. Unfortunately, kind of like with COVID, you don't know how to contract for something when it's never occurred before, or when it hasn't occurred in that way. So I would say, Daniel, that there is a lot right now. There are a lot of conversations going on of, what is the equitable thing to do here as between the owner, the GC, and the sub, and how can we work this out? And I will say that, speaking more broadly, one of the things I love most about practicing construction law and the client base that we have they are people and companies that want to do the right thing and want to work things out. And so it's a very collaborative industry. It certainly is very adversarial too, but
Sure.
Most people are willing to work together to try to come up with a solution that makes sense. And the ultimate goal is the same. We want to get whatever it is that needs to be built.
Yeah, absolutely. And I ask that question because it's on my mind as I'm preparing to teach sports law again this fall. And last year when we taught it, a lot came out of the force majeure clauses with so many sporting events that were either being postponed or canceled, or thinking about the Olympics and the NBA season, all those things. And my students were asking me about, those force majeure clauses and how, all the contracts that were involved with television, with revenue and all these things. And like, yeah, I mean, you do have contracts, but these things aren't going to happen. So we've got to figure out how to move forward as partners between the leagues and the television networks and so on and so forth. I mean, it's not realistic for people to just like put their foot down and say, no, you still owe us for the games you're not playing and ads you're not showing. Like that's just not realistic. So that sounds like, at least some of that is trickling through a lot of the other industries as well, trying to figure all this out over the past year, especially. One other follow-up on that, because you mentioned this in terms of what's in the contract for price escalation. Are you finding kind of coming out of COVID that there are new provisions that are having to be added to contracts. Now, you said like before that you haven't gone through this before. So now that we have, like, do you expect to see new types of provisions in contracts to handle pandemics or other kind of related type things as you move forward out of this this time that we've been in?
I will say that to your point, I think I've heard the word force majeure more in the last year than I've heard in my entire legal career.
Except out of law school, except for
exactly. We have all thought a lot more about force majeure than I think any of us thought we ever were going to have to. And in a lot of ways, it does feel like a law school question, right? Because
it's a hypo.
It is so novel. But yes, the word pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to, COVID-19, the whole gamut. I'm seeing those being put specifically. And, now we know it exists. Now we know we need to account for it. The other thing that, contractors have to account for or have had to account for in the last year is additional costs associated with PPE and other measures that had to be implemented on job sites to make sure that the workers could continue to work safely. That's kind of having an impact. We were an essential business here in Texas.
Right.
So, but I will say at the beginning of COVID, different counties were making different decisions. And so we spent about a month trying to figure out what was going on and who could do what, where, and how.
Right.
And so it is nice to be on the other side of that and to feel like business is back to usual, a little bit more normal now.
Yeah, I feel like everybody kind of had to become an employment lawyer in the last year, right? Like you to kind of handle all of those pieces for sure. Well, great. So I want to transition and ask you some things related to just practice and for associates that are listening, young lawyers that are listening, really to kind of dive into some things, get them some advice and how to be the best that they can be as lawyers. What's something that you picked up or learned in your early days of practice that has stayed with you and stuck with you and is still part of how you practice today?
Two things come to mind. The first one is adaptability, and the second is managing expectations. And I'd like to kind of expand on both of those. As I mentioned, I started at Gardere, so I started at a big law firm environment. I'll also mention I started in 2009. So
hey,
I started
me too.
Yeah, I graduated in 2008. I clerked for a judge for a year. So in the middle of my clerkship year, the recession is happening. My start date got pushed. I started in all of that confusion and chaos. And it really was a very chaotic and stressful time, I'm sure to be entering into the legal profession. And it was just kind of a scary environment to walk into. So I felt like one of the things that I was able to do from early on was try to be adaptable as to working for different people, figuring out how I could best be an asset, quite frankly, to keep my job some days is what I was worried about. So I think that served me well in the long run. I also think it served me well starting my career in a downturn because I know what the legal market looks like during those times. And so in hindsight, it's been something that I think has helped me grow as a lawyer. At the time, I was not thankful for that whatsoever.
Well, anyone listening who graduated, within the last 15 months is right there with you. I think that's the group that can absolutely identify with that time period that you came out in and I came out in. This last 15 months is something similar, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And it really is. I think that there's a lot of similarities between the new listeners that we might have and what 2008, 2009 was like. And I think that trying to be adaptable, learning to work with different personalities, different partner styles, especially at a big firm. I worked with everyone from a micromanager to oh my gosh, please respond to this email to help me guarantee I'm not malpracticing on this case you've asked me to handle. So it's good to work with different personalities. It's good to learn from older lawyers, even maybe some things you don't want to do yourself as a lawyer, but getting that range, I think, was very helpful for me as an attorney. And the other one I mentioned was managing expectations. I learned early on that it's better to communicate, even if communicating is, I can't get this to you when I said I was. And that translates, when you're an associate, that translates directly over to your work for the partner. And when you're a partner, that translates directly over to how you're managing your client. So it's a skill, if you can learn it early on, is going to benefit you throughout your entire career for sure.
Yeah. And the first one that you mentioned, the adaptability, and then also just kind of that how to learn how to work with different partners. It was funny because we were joking about this on a recent episode where someone was saying how they preferred for, an associate when the partner's giving the associate feedback, maybe some, edits on a brief or something like that, or motion. And, that they don't want them to just like take everything that was on there and just implement it and move it on down the supply chain. Basically, like they want to, let's have a discussion about this. Do you disagree with what I'm saying? Or do you want to, why did you include this? Let's talk about it. But so we kind of went through that a little bit. And then at the end, it was kind of like, but of course that's me. And like, like the other partner next door may not want that. They may just do what I asked, And so, but it is important, right, to figure out, especially if you're working for multiple partners, which a lot of people are, to not just take kind of one style. So, this is the firm style of work. Like, no, every partner is going to have a different approach, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you picked up more recently, that you're like, oh man, I wish I would have known that when I was getting started? Anything that comes to mind there?
The thing that comes to mind, I do think I wish I would have known, or maybe just given more attention to getting into the driver's seat for developing my career professionally. I've been very blessed in that. I think it's kind of just worked out for me by virtue of the fact that I've worked for a lot of good partners along the way, and still work with my partners today. But I try to encourage our associates here that you do have control over your career. And if there is a partner that after you've worked with, many and seen the different styles, if there's someone that you really work well with, and you want more work from them, go ask for it. If there's a specific kind of case you want to be on, go ask for it. If there's a skill you need to develop and you're not getting that, come tell me. We have a very open door policy here, but it's funny. Our partners always say, "Oh, our doors are always open," but you got to come to the door. You've got to come to the door and you've got to come knocking. I had a mentee recently who was actually a third year at SMU, and she was interested in being a construction lawyer. And she did one of the best jobs I've ever seen of reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I'm following up. Can we get together and meet? Can I follow up with you on this specific thing?" And none of that is bothersome to a partner, but we really do need someone to push us, because yes, our door is open, but we're probably not coming out of the office. You got to come in.
Yeah. That tracks so nicely with a lot, I think, of the advice that we've gotten from folks who have said, look, when associates sometimes don't realize that their work assignments or that, projects won't necessarily be just hand delivered to them to keep them busy all the time. And that oftentimes, depending on the firm, it all can depend, but like a lot of times, associates actually do need to go out to the partners and get the work. And the virtue of that, as you were just describing, and one of the benefits of that is that also gives you some latitude to choose who you get to work for and what type of work you get to do. You kind of get to initiate in those environments. And so once you kind of, identify who that is and what that is that you want to do, you kind of have some freedom to do that. And so I think people miss an opportunity oftentimes. It can be really bad if they don't, get out and go to the partner's office, because you might wind up at the end of the year billing, way fewer hours than you're supposed to. Just because, like you said, the partner's doors are open, but you got to go to the partner. They're not always come out to you. And so, but that benefit of getting to choose what you do and who you work for, I think is a bit perk to that not everybody realizes and takes advantage of. So I think that's really good to point that out. And so, for people listening, don't be bashful, don't be shy. If you're sitting there with nothing to do, or your, hours aren't starting to stack up, go find that partner that you like, get in there and ask for some work. Right?
Absolutely. And, as associates, you're, especially in construction, we do have a lot of document review. You're going to be, there are times you're probably going to be sitting and doing things you might not want to be doing, but you don't want to look up 6 years in and go, I've been reviewing documents for 6 years,
Right.
or
Right.
I've been just kind of taking the work as it comes, but I've developed no specialty. I've developed no niche. I've developed no relationship with these partners' clients that might serve me well as I'm trying to rise up the ranks. So it really does involve an intentionality that I think as lawyers sometimes is hard for us to stop and think about and craft, because we are so busy about just billing those hours and doing that work. So you have to find that balance. And sometimes you do. I mean, again, I started in 2009. I billed some hours and did some work. But also taught me a lot about what I knew I didn't want to do in terms of, I did some work in different practice areas, just trying to keep myself busy. And in hindsight, it was helpful to know, okay, there's no doubt I want to be a construction lawyer. I'm not interested in general commercial litigation or, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, because I think sometimes, and you can speak to it from a construction standpoint, but I think it applies to other, I would just call them kind of sub practice areas or niches within kind of a litigation space or transaction space, but maybe speak a little bit to, because I think sometimes younger associates have a fear of what they would just describe probably as pigeonholing themselves too early in their career, right? Where they think, I might be interested in construction law, but do I want to go into a construction law firm and will I get pigeonholed in that? And if I don't like it, what do I do then? Or if I go to an education law firm, I think I might like to do that. But if I don't like it in 3 years, what transferable skills do I have? Or what are my options at that point? What would you say to someone who's maybe interested in an area? It can be construction law, but a niche area, but are afraid of kind of that, looking up 3 years down the road, I don't really like this. And now I maybe feel like I've either wasted that time or I'm kind of not as marketable in some other areas that I need to go pursue now.
And it can be a scary leap to take. I certainly remember at Gardere and trying to make that decision. Do I want to be a transactional lawyer? I was considering banking law, which is funny now. I'm horrible at math. I don't even know why I was considering that, but I was. And then I was looking at construction, and it is kind of scary to commit yourself in the sense of, I'm going to do this thing. And it is a little bit more niche or specialty than maybe just being a general, commercial litigator or something along those lines. But the good thing about construction law is those skills are transferable in the sense of you're learning how to litigate. You're just learning how to litigate a specific type of case.
Right.
And a lot of what we know as construction lawyers that it does kind of make us more specialized is just the knowledge of the industry and how the industry works and all of those components. So that piece of the puzzle is not going to be transferable if you decide you want to go do something else. But the general skills that you're building in terms of learning how to litigate, learning how to review documents, learning how to work with partners and all of that, I do believe would be transferable. If you got into it and said, I've decided this isn't for me, which it can happen. Sure. It can certainly happen. But you've got to start somewhere. And so as a young lawyer, I'd say if you can do as much due diligence as you can to try to figure out which area you want to go into, then at some point you just got to take that leap and, try to ensure that you are at least working in an area where you will have some transferable skills, even if it's not fully across the board. Every single thing is going to translate if you do decide to make a move.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, advantages of going to a firm like yours, a firm that is smaller and in a niche is that you get to become an expert in something very quickly. And then also you're getting usually a lot more opportunities to do things that at a mid-size or larger firm, you're not going to get at that stage of career, because it's maybe a 7-person team at Gardere and it's a 2 or 3-person team at your place, and just by the nature of the numbers. And so getting to take on more responsibility, and there's some options, right, to get a little bit further along maybe than someone across town, if that's what you're wanting to do. And so there's ways to take advantage of those opportunities and set yourself apart for whatever you're wanting to do next, it seems.
Absolutely. And another thing I will say, I can't speak to all construction law firms, but to ours, we handle everything from small subcontractor payment claims that might come up, under $50,000, someone filed a lien, to, $50 million plus, very complex, very involved, litigation, it's almost always multi-party. It is almost, always staffed with multiple lawyers, but I've always loved having that breadth of a practice. I'm not always involved in deep, complex litigation, but I'm not, always just doing small payment claims. So I really get, even though I'm in an industry, I still get a whole lot of variety, which is, for me, is something that I look for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. What's something that, as you've worked at the firms that you have and observed and watched young lawyers, what's something that stands out to you from either a pet peeve or just something that you see it and you're like, oh gosh, we got to kind of fix that, correct that? Maybe something that they wouldn't necessarily, not intuitive, something they wouldn't necessarily think of. But what do you see in young lawyers that you feel like is something that they ought to watch out for?
Failure to communicate is probably my number one. We have a set of core values here at Slates Harwell, and communication is one of those core values. Communication not only with each other, but also with our clients, of course. I see associates run into trouble when they're not communicating properly, when there is something coming up on a deadline that they're not going to make, when they've made a mistake, instead of communicating that a mistake has been made, going down the road of trying to fix it. And then the other thing that I really like to see in associates is the ability to think of the assignment and the case in a broader sense than just the narrow piece that they've been given. We try very hard to staff our cases where associates are on a case, so they're getting to see the whole case and not just the, hey, do this research memo, hey, draft this piece of litigation. I think as an associate, I could speak to this personally, it's very hard to be helpful and efficient and really give, just give everything you might have to offer if you don't know what all's going on in a case. Right. So communication upstream with the partners is important. And, I've had some very, I've worked with my same people for a long time. So my partners now were my bosses in the day. It's, hey, copy me on every email you're sending, blind copy me if you have to, let me see what is going on behind the curtain, because I can think about the big picture. Then I can manage your deadlines better. I can do it all better if you're communicating with me. So that works both ways, but especially associates, communicating not only as to deadlines, but if you're working on an assignment and you see, you mentioned this earlier, Daniel, if you're working on something and you see, hey, what about this other thing? Bring that up to me. Or if you say, hey, I don't think this revision is right, bring that up to me. Right. So to me, that ability to see it as a case and to see it as an overall, goal we're trying to achieve versus staying so pigeonholed in your one thing you were told to do. Right. I love to see that in associates. Yeah,
no, absolutely. It's really good. As we think about lawyers who are either applying for positions or interviewing with you, with your firm, what's something that you look for maybe on paper that is important for you to see in a resume or in a cover letter as lawyers maybe been out a couple of years, like, oh, maybe I would like to go do construction law. Maybe I will consider a move over to do that. What are you looking forward to determine whether or not you think it might be a person that'd be a good fit or someone you'd want to talk to further?
When it comes to paper, if the specific construction experience isn't there, and we're looking at a lateral, it's incredibly helpful to know that the lateral does have at least an interest in exploring construction law more, or,
Sure.
Explaining to us why you would be considering coming over. We don't have a requirement that, everyone that comes to work for us has prior construction experience, but we are looking for, is there an interest, because it's a commitment to a specific area. The other thing that I would say that probably I see on paper, is not necessarily a positive, but would be more red flags.
Yeah.
Is if you see that a lot of moves have been made.
Yes.
That's common in the legal industry. There's nothing wrong with that, but I would say that it seems as though most partners will comment on that. So be prepared, or prepare in advance to explain, maybe the reason. You don't have to tell me, all your personal business, but just what are the reasons you've made those moves, so that we know we're not going to bring someone on to train that is looking to hop 6 months from now.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, because I do get asked about that from candidates a decent amount, and particularly when they're maybe just a year or two in to their, either first position or maybe into their current position, and they're thinking about a move, and they'll ask me like, "What hurt me if I've been at 2 places in 2 years or 3 places in 2 years, whatever." And that's essentially the conversation we have. What you just mentioned, that I think maybe 10, 20 years ago, it may have been like a total like non-starter for some people, and it might still be for some of the more senior partners who just have that historical framework for how to look at things. But I think in general, like you said, the industry has evolved towards, there's a lot more movement now, and there's a lot more acceptance of that movement. But I do think still most people are going to want some type of acknowledgement of it, or if not a full explanation of it. So to be prepared to talk about it and not just shut down or not ignore it or whatever. And so I think that's essentially what you just mentioned, is sort of the conversation I have with those types of candidates when they're asking me those questions. So it's good to hear. And just a good reminder for everyone listening. Yeah. If you've been a few places, don't hide from it. Don't try to deny it. Don't, make excuses for it. And for sure, don't point at your old employers as they were a problem or you didn't like it there. I think there's some danger there in trying to explain it, that you sort of are throwing old employers under the bus, which a new employer doesn't want to be the next old employer, I think, right? And so be real careful about that.
It's definitely a hard line to kind of walk, I think, when you're in that position. But I will be very clear to the listeners that I'm certainly not advocating that you should just stay somewhere where you are miserable for the sake of staying
Absolutely
there.
Not.
If
Right.
it is not a good fit for you culturally, if it is not what you want to be doing, life is short. Go
Absolutely.
for it. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, all we do here is try to make sure that people are in the right place for them. And so that it might be today, it might be tomorrow. But like, I think what we're talking about is making sure they're prepared for, those interview questions that might come as they're preparing to do that. So I think that's great. And then once they do get in the interview with you, what's something that you have seen that's worked well or not when it's an interview situation with a candidate? What tends to happen there?
For me, when during the interview process, the number one thing that I am looking at is as I mentioned, Slates Harwell has a set of core values, and one of those is culture. And culture is really important to us. We are a small firm. When you're a small firm and you work together this closely, it's a family business almost, you're just not related by blood. And so we want candidates that are considering coming to work here. We want them to know what we're about. We want them to know how we operate, and we want to know what they're about and how they operate. And we want to make sure that that is a good fit for our culture, and for them to come over and have the best professional experience. We really feel like that that we have to have that piece of the puzzle. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really what I'm looking for probably most in an interview, is just kind of that intangible, is this going to be a good quote unquote fit? And that's a bad answer in the sense that I don't know if it provides any helpful, helpful advice, but that's really what I'm looking for.
Well, I think it is helpful because I think that so often, candidates get hung up on, the process being completely focused on credentials and experience and skills and certainly that there are some probably just, bottom line things that have to be there to get in the door, depending on which firm it is. But beyond that, I think especially with the small firm world, which is who we work with most here, that fit, that culture is super important and is the higher priority kind of once you get through kind of that bottom floor level of capacity to do the work, and it's not going to, give way if someone's really, really talented or really, really smart or whatever. If the other boxes aren't checked, that's not going to get it done. Like you're going to have to have both, right? So where there's some places, large firms that can find places to put people and we all know some of those folks that, but that's great. Like, that's great that there's a place for them. And, but that's just not the way it is. Like you said, in essentially a family business when it's like 12 lawyers and some staff and it's just, you're together all the time, every day. So I think that's good. A good reminder for sure. Okay. Well, we're, essentially almost out of time. So before we finish with our rapid fire questions, I just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything that we haven't talked about yet or just something that you think would be helpful for the lawyers listening to hear or know about. Floor is yours for any last minute thoughts.
Deep thoughts by Colbie.
Yes.
I'm really passionate about mentorship, especially with women. There are not, as I'm sure you can guess, a whole lot of women in the construction law segment. Although we're getting more, and so I would just encourage the listeners to seek both a mentor and a sponsor. And the distinction there, I mean, find someone who can help you learn how to practice law. Find someone that you respect and you like their working style and you use them as a mentor. But be intentional about finding a sponsor too, someone who is going to advocate for you, someone who is going to help you advance yourself and your career in the way that you want to do that. And again, it's hard for us to do that as lawyers because there's so much focus on the billable hour, but grow yourself in that way. Take the time to do it because it will benefit you so much as your career progresses. And then when you get to the point where you can be a mentor, be one.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned and split out kind of the two different roles there. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're also talking about that a sponsor would potentially be someone maybe outside of your firm or someone you're not necessarily learning directly from on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to the way that you were kind of describing the actually kind of legal mentor as someone who's kind of teaching you how to become a lawyer. Am I hearing that right? Just to understand the differences in how you were talking about those.
Yes, absolutely. I think you can find mentors and sponsors both inside and outside your law firm. For me, I've had to look outside my law firm because there are no female partners above me. I was the first female partner here at Slates Harwell. And so when it comes to looking for specifically for women, partner mentors in construction law, there are a lot of great women and we're fortunate that the construction law bar is small and that we have, pretty good relationships. And so you do have to sometimes look outside where you are. And same thing with sponsorship. To me, when you're looking for a sponsor, you are looking for someone who is going to help promote and grow you professionally. For me personally, my sponsor is within my, firm, and he's done an amazing job of helping me, get opportunities and introduce me. And those, it's just more than mentorship, mentorship plus.
Got it. That's great. Well, I hope people will take up that mantle and go out and find folks like that. And then, like you said, I think really important, then pay it forward once you're in that spot to be able to do that. So that's great. Well, all right. Rapid fire questions to close out here. Kind of one word, one phrase answers. If you're ready, we'll go to those next.
Let's do it.
All right. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Integrity.
Awesome. What habit has been key to your success?
Organization and planning ahead.
There you go. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
I had a hard time with this. I'm not an appy person. So I'm going with my timekeeping system, which is for us is Coyote. I will say that this is not see, now I'm not being rapid fire, but
that's okay.
One of the things I did not do well as a young associate was keep my time. And then I spent a day at the end of the month trying to figure it all out. Right. And I am a big believer in, I keep my timers running. I enter my time. I close it out at the end of every day. And it's life-changing. So I know that's hard to do as a young associate, but do it. Absolutely.
And you said it was Coyote, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. We'll link to that in the notes for people to take a look at. Let's see. What would, and this is a little bit of a different question than we've asked before, so I'm switching it up a little bit. But what would you list first in the interest section of your resume?
And I have to keep it to one. That's so hard. Family.
Yeah.
Family. My husband and my 2-year-old son.
Yeah. So for the transition and people that have listened to the show, that question has essentially been what's your favorite social distancing activity, which kind of gets at the same type of thing. But I'm really wanting to transition out of COVID and out of social distancing. So I didn't really ask as much about COVID today, and I'm asking a more general interest question today. So that's where we're headed. So we're transitioning out. Good. That's what we're doing. All right. Last one. Your favorite legal movie?
Primal Fear.
Oh, Primal Fear.
For the first time during COVID, and I love it. So really? It has elevated itself to the #1 spot.
How about that? That is fantastic. So, when you get an hour, we did a deep dive on Primal Fear last month. It's in the podcast feed. So yeah, we got into the nuts and bolts of all of it. And so that's one that I've always enjoyed. And so, man, that's a really good one. So I'm glad that you mentioned it.
Yeah. Edward Norton is just, his acting abilities are amazing. And if you ever want to determine what you don't want to do as a lawyer, you can figure some of that out by movies, because I for sure do not want to be a criminal lawyer. That I could not handle.
Well, and yeah, and Martin Vale doesn't give the best probably picture of what you should be doing. But there are some great that we go into things in that podcast about, because that was Edward Norton's first big role, and some of the things that went into him getting that role, and it's some really just like serendipitous type stuff, and some cool things with him. So yeah, if you're an Edward Norton fan, that's some interesting things to look at, because that movie really did kind of make him, kind of send him on his way into an amazing career. So, well, awesome. Colbie, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're really busy, and so we appreciate you sharing some of your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
All right. My thanks again to Colbie Campbell for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing 2 things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you're interested in any of the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or you just want to visit about what else might be out there, please get in touch with me, and I would be happy to visit with you. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.